Welcome to Bible Court. The case we are about to hear is a tragic story of brother versus brother that resulted in murder. While the full story has not been told, Cain appears to have risen up against his brother and killed him. However, he never seems to have received the punishment some think he is coming. The prosecution will make the case that his punishment should be increased, while Cain's attorney will argue that there is more than enough guilt to go around. The case of, am I my brother's keeper? But first, let's hear the original story as recorded in our court documents.
Here is the account of these events as recorded in Genesis 4. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have produced a human being with the help of God. Next, she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a tiller of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to God an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel, for his part, brought of the firstlings of his flock, their fat portions. And God had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. Then God said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. Cain said to his brother Abel, Let us go out to the field. And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then God said to Cain, Where is your brother Abel? Abel said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And God said, What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it will no longer yield to you its strength. You will be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to God, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Today you have driven me away from the soil, and I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and anyone who meets me may kill me. Then God said to him, Not so. Whoever kills Cain will suffer a sevenfold vengeance. And God put a mark on Cain, so that no one who came upon him would kill him. Then Cain went away from the presence of God and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city and named it Enoch after his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Mehujael, and Mehujael the father of Methusael, and Methusael the father of Lamech. Lamech took 2 wives. The name of one was Ada, and the other was Zillah. Ada bore Jabal. He was the ancestor of those who live in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the ancestor of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah bore Tubal-Cain, who made all kinds of bronze and iron tools. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain is avenged 7-fold, truly Lamech 70-fold. Adam knew his wife Eve again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another child instead of Abel, because Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of God.
Let's proceed with the opening argument. We'll hear from the prosecution first.
Your Honor, we ask, should we let Cain walk so easily from what is arguably the worst crime ever perpetrated, killing one's own brother? Cain murdered his younger brother in cold blood and then tried to cover it up. We present evidence that he planned his crime, knew the full consequences of his anger and murderous intent and destruction, and tried to cover up his crime to avoid punishment. We will charge Cain with destruction of an entire way of life. He destroyed the possibility of righteous life on earth by depriving us of the pious descendants of Abel. We will further argue that God's treatment of Cain is a demonstration of God's over-generous character as judge, which, by letting sin often go unpunished, is the source of so many of the problems in our world.
Your Honor, in his defense, we will ask the court to hear the story from Cain's perspective. We believe that a full understanding of our client will lead to a reduced sentence. We ask, why did God, who treated Adam and Eve's seemingly minor offense with such severity, let Cain off so easily? God's sympathy and Cain's reduced sentence suggest that Cain is not entirely at fault. We will argue that God may have been partly to blame for Cain's crime by provoking the young man's anger and by failing to take action to prevent crime when God saw it coming. God knew better than Cain what was coming. We think Cain's crime was part of God's larger plan to create the world, and it was a necessary violence which God is avoiding responsibility for by letting Cain take the rap.
Bailiff, swearing to witnesses.
Please state your names for the record.
Adam and Eve.
The ground, eyewitness.
I am God's attorney. I will be speaking for God.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Prosecution, call your first witness.
We call a 21st century descendant of Cain, Dr. Deborah, from the Harvard School of Public Health. We'd like to begin by setting some context for this trial. Dr. Deborah, when Cain killed his brother Abel, he deprived all future generations of the righteous descendants of God's favored child. As a result, we here today are all descendants of Cain, the first murderer. Can you tell us where this unavenged crime has led us in these 3,000 years?
Yes, thank you. We are a country that's infatuated with violence. Some of us are in love with violence or addicted to it. We celebrate it. We are entertained by it. We run to read about it, to see it. We encourage children sometimes to fight. We don't want to wimp for a kid. In a lot of ways, the cultural issues are important as the family issues because even when a family is trying to give the right message, a child begins to learn from outside the family different messages. As I travel across the country, one thing I see pretty universally among American children is an admiration for violence.
Do you think this could be because we are all descendants of a murderer who got away with it?
That would be correct.
So, by killing Abel, Cain set human history on a foundation of violence and rivalry, which we are bound to repeat in every generation.
It certainly seems that way.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Doctor, but don't we all bear some responsibility for our own actions? God seems to have suggested when speaking with Cain that we are all able to avoid or resist the sin crouching at the door. Just because he killed his brother, Cain can't be held responsible for everything that happens afterward.
So you admit that Cain is culpable?
Only partially.
Thank you, Dr. Deborah.
The prosecution calls Adam and Eve. As a parent myself, I sympathize with your loss. When God punished Cain for his crime by banishing him from your homeland, you were left childless. But not forever. You and Eve had another child named Seth, I believe. Surely he was able to help provide for a healthy line of God-fearing descendants.
We tried to be fruitful and multiply as God commanded us. But within 7 generations, Cain's evil descendants had made such an evil mess of things that God scratched the whole plan and started over again, with Noah after the flood. And who did God choose to start over with? Noah was a great-great-grandson of Cain. If only God had wiped out Cain to begin with, things might be a lot better now.
Eve, you and Adam were commanded to be fruitful and multiply. It's easy to immortalize Abel and his descendants as righteous because they never had a chance to sin or to test their passions. But there's no guarantee they would have been any better. In fact, the boys seem to only have risen to your own expectations of them. In Hebrew, Cain means to get or to possess, and he certainly took matters into his own hands. And what does Abel mean? Please speak loudly so the jury can hear you.
It means puff of air, of vanity, and nothing.
It's very hard for children to rise above their parents' expectations of them, isn't it?
Thank you, Adam and Eve.
The prosecution calls the ground as a witness. Mr. Ground, you are the chief forensic evidence in this case. Once the soil was a friend of Cain's, willingly bringing forth whatever Cain planted and tilled. We know the special relationship farmers have with the land. Now you refuse to yield produce to Cain, the farmer. What happened?
I was the only witness to this crime. I and God. When Cain killed Abel, he left the dark stain of blood, the first blood, upon me. Then he dug me open to bury the body and asked me to hide the evidence of his crime. But I cried out to God. Neither of us had seen blood before, and were somewhat shocked. It was an ugly scene, one I had hoped to never see again. How could I work with Cain after that? After he tried to make me an accessory to his murder? Do you blame me?
We're not denying Cain killed Abel. No questions.
Thank you, Ground.
The prosecution calls Dr. Friedman, MD, PhD, expert psychologist, as a witness. Dr. Friedman, the jury has already read your family workup in their court briefings. You seem to imply that this crime was the result of long-standing family conflict.
Yes, both parents seem quite prone to blame others for their own problems, and the boys seem to inherit this tendency. Abel assumed too much credit for his own success, and Cain too little responsibility for his own actions. Cain is guilty of his crime, and his attempt at covering it up with the rather lame, "I am my brother's keeper," does not absolve him of the consequences.
Yet, Dr. Friedman, you also seem to imply that successful intervention in this family would begin with the parents, not the children. Wouldn't an increased punishment for Cain only contribute to this family's tendency to blame others, rather than allowing all parties to assume their share of guilt and responsibility?
As they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman.
The prosecution calls God as its final witness. Okay, God, why'd you let Cain off so easy? The evidence is clear. He murdered his brother. He tried to cover up the murder. This first murder led to a violent society that was deprived of the righteous progeny of Abel.
I will be merciful to whom I will be merciful.
You yourself told Cain that sin was crouching at his door. If you knew that such sin and violence was about to be unleashed, why didn't you intervene? Why didn't you prevent Cain from killing Abel?
I tried to warn him. I said, "Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at your door. Its desire for you, but you must master it."
Yes, you know we're pressing for a harder sentence than you delivered, given the severity of the crime and its immeasurable repercussions on human society.
I am who I am. I will be who I will be. I will be merciful to whom I will be merciful.
God, we appreciate you warning to our client, but why didn't you warn Abel? Your Honor, how do we come to terms with a God who plays favorites? With a God whose own preference turns brother against brother, making them enemies? A God who is silent in the moment of violence? A God who just doesn't give answers to these deep questions?
God, you may step down.
God didn't answer the question. Why do we need to go on?
He got what he had coming to him.
The court will come to order. Defense, call your first witness.
The defense calls Cain to the stand.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I wish I'd had more help from God before. I do.
Cain, God spoke to you.
Yes, some stupid words. Don't be angry that I hadn't done well. Don't let sin get me.
Cain, why didn't you heed God's warning?
I didn't understand. I didn't know what God was talking about. What was the objective evil, crouching outside me and yet poised to control me? All I wanted was to know why God didn't accept my offering. Why didn't you accept my offering, God? Why?
Let's go back.
I don't want to.
You were angry at God and at Abel.
Yes.
You said, let's go for a walk in the field.
Yes.
But you were disoriented.
Objection, leading the witness.
I'll allow it. Goes to intention. Overruled. The witness will answer.
You were disoriented.
Yes, all I could see was that altar.
Let's talk about the sacrifices.
I still don't understand. I was completely alarmed. I watched Abel kill his lamb. Kill it. It was an abomination, this killing. Nothing was to be killed in God's garden. I gave the produce, the fruit of life, to God, and yet God rejected my sacrifice. God rejected me. Me. I wasn't the one who first killed a living being. Abel did that. It was horrible. I was nauseated.
Is that what triggered your anger?
Triggered? God? I don't know. I just reacted. His smug face with that bloody sacrifice. That abomination of everything, I believed. And him saying many my sacrifice wasn't good enough. Good enough?
What happened?
I can't really remember.
Try. Take it step by step.
I say, let's go for a walk, and as we're walking, all I can see is that image of Abel's altar. The sacrifice is pouring blood. I see Abel pointing proudly, jeering that my offering is not acceptable. I go to the altar, I wipe my produce off the rocks. With one hand, I pick up the sacrificed lamb and throw it to the ground. My hands are covered in its blood. I'm screaming and screaming, and I hear him screaming and screaming. And then silence.
Silence.
Silence. The agony is over. Then I look. Abel is lying on the ground. I am covered in blood.
Your witness?
So you don't deny killing your brother?
No.
And you feel your behavior was justified?
I don't know.
You don't know. This boy who you played with, your only childhood companion, the one who knew you better than anyone, you killed in cold blood.
No.
Cold blood.
No, you don't understand. He had committed an abomination.
The only abomination he committed was pointing out your chintzy sacrifice, was pointing out your pride, was pointing out your inadequacy.
No.
Cain, God talked to you directly, didn't God?
Yes.
God speaking directly to an individual. Now, wouldn't you agree that is a rather rare occurrence?
I wouldn't know.
It is.
Okay, so what?
So what? The Holy One decides to offer you a warning, and you didn't heed it.
I didn't understand.
Give me a break. God told you to master sin, to realize that if you did well, you'd be accepted.
But that's just it. I did do well. My sacrifice was the fruit of my labor. What was wrong with it?
That's not the point.
Yes, it is. What was wrong, God? Why are you so arbitrary? Why?
It's not fair!
Yeah, Cain's
What's
right.
with the sacrifice?
Order in the court.
No.
God warned you. You went ahead and killed Abel and then tried to cover up your crime.
No.
And I quote, "Then the Lord God said to Cain, 'Where is your brother Abel?' And Cain said, 'I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?' Do you deny saying these words?
No.
So you did cover up your deed.
Objection. Self-incrimination.
Overruled. I'll allow it. The witness will answer the question.
Yes, I covered it up.
You only cover up these things you think you've done wrong. Your very act of covering up the crime conclusively proves not only your crime, but that you knew what you had done. No further questions.
I didn't know what I had done.
The witness will step down.
Somebody listen. I didn't know. I was scared. God set me up.
The jury will disregard the witness. Last statement. Mr. Cain, step down now, or we will have be forcibly removed.
The defense calls God to the stand. Your Holiness, you saw this coming. You could see the struggles going on within Cain, enough so that you felt you needed to give him a warning, to cool off, to control his anger. We have already established that Cain might not have fully understood your warning, never having experienced death before. And we're troubled by the fact that the occasion for a rivalry between brothers was essentially a religious one. It's not fair for God to create a bad situation and then demand that we rise above it. Cain may have made some poor judgments in this case, sinning terribly, but he had limited knowledge. Yet you, knowing human hearts as you do, watch this unfold without intervening. Why is that?
As of that time, if you will remember, I had only one experience of human free will myself. Granted, it did not go well, but I was still hoping. I was rooting for Cain to show strength in the face of adversity.
So this was a test? You wanted to see Cain on trial?
It didn't start out that way. Most of my trials never did.
Well, you got a good one. Cain's trial has become our trial. We live every day of our own lives still struggling with his questions. Questions of fairness and right and wrong, and inner strength and trust in you. Our Christian faith has taught us to plead the case of the innocent victims, of the Abels, as my colleagues have done. But in the last few centuries, we have also needed to see hope for our Cains. Is this story we have been discussing a redemption story?
All of my stories are redemption stories. Cain was my first child to have really strong passions, and he struggled with them. I welcomed his questions and his doubts, but I also insisted that he could control them and not sin. I needed passion like his in the world. Don't get me wrong, Abel was a good kid. He just always did what he thought was right without question. I didn't have the heart to make him struggle. But Cain was already a go-getter, as Eve named him. If he could control his passions, he could really use them to contribute to the world. Would help me do good things. Sure, he messed up the first time, really big, but I understand, and went light with him.
And did he learn?
Oh sure, he became a great architect, building cities for people to live in. He named the first one after his own son, though I kind of think of it as a memorial to Abel. His kids created music and art, and metalworking and culture. In many ways, as St. Augustine noted years later, Cain became a model citizen.
Just one more question, Your Holiness. When you spoke to Cain and told him that he may conquer sin, was that a promise that you knew he would one day win his struggle, or just a possibility? Were you taking chances with Cain?
I'm always taking chances when I love the people I have created. I accept that. It's a risk I am willing to take, and because of that, the world is not everything I hoped it would have been. I accept that too. To answer your question, the choice was his. He could blame the world, or his brother, or even me for his struggles, and thus lose the struggle. Or he could accept the struggle and work with his brother and with me to change the world.